Hey, thanks, Nick. Thank you for everybody that joined. Like Nick said, this presentation is mainly going to be on the shift from antivirus to EDR and MDR. We're going to go over a brief history of different types of viruses that were kind of out there in the wild, the history of when viruses got started. We are then going to focus on EDR, what that is, and then also how EDR can be enhanced by layering on with MDR. And then we're going to go through a couple of examples when antivirus just doesn't get the job done and EDR takes over. I see Chris Shea on there. How's it going, Christopher Shea? Long time no see. I believe Chris was a student of mine way back when. Hopefully you're doing well. And so without further ado, this is going to be the presentation. So we're also gonna have a poll question. I'm gonna test everybody's little their knowledge. So it'll be fun. All right, I gotta figure out how to click a mouse and then we're on our way. So like Nick said, I'm the VP of cybersecurity over at Compass IT Compliance. We specialize in, well, compliance and cybersecurity. We do all sorts of manner of PCI, risk assessments, ethical hacking, anything you could really kind of think of, we can handle. So if you're interested in our services or just even talking to us about anything, you could always reach out to me or anybody else in the organization. So let's kind of get started, right? I like to kind of know a little bit about how we are, where we are, and you got to be able to know history in order to, know why we're at the state we're in, right? So let's kind of take a look at a brief history of computer viruses. The first computer virus wasn't even really a computer virus, but it was basically a little message that a programmer built, and it was on ARPANET. Does anybody know what ARPANET is? Maybe somebody throw it in the chat if you know what it is. If not, I'll kind of explain what ARPANET is. ARPANET was basically the government's internet, right? Before we had the internet as it exists today. It was a really closed system, but he ended up building this little program, right? That just kind of popped up on every computer and it said, hey, I'm the creeper, catch me if you can, right? And that was kind of like the first self-propagating program that kind of ever got written and traversed the network. A follow-up to that is he actually, the name of the person escapes me right now. He actually didn't like the fact that his program was spreading around, so he built another program to hunt it down and destroy it as well. So that's kind of a little interesting history lesson there. That was in 1971, right? Fast forward to about 11 years later, the ELK cloner was introduced, and that was basically started getting propagated around Apple II computers. And the way this individual did this, he basically had a game disk and he had the virus on the game disk. So when you put in the game disk and you ran the game 50 times, eventually on the 50th, or it might have been 25, I'm sorry, on the 25th time, basically he had this little message pop up in the boot sector when you booted your machine. So this was kind of benign. It really depends on how your system was set up. If you had your system set up in a certain way, it basically bricked your computer. So I wouldn't really say benign, but it wasn't really super harmful if you didn't do any crazy modifications to your computer. All right. So basically fast forward, right? There was all of these different viruses that were kind of built in between this time frame. Then we and there's different schools of thought on this. But when we talk about viruses, we use it like a general classification, right? A virus is something typically that needs end user interaction. A worm is something that's self-propagating, meaning it could just kind of scour the internet. And then finally, both of those can kind of be classified into something called malware, right? And there's been all these different terms throughout the years. Like if you remember, there's like adware, right? Adware is one of those things that just popped up ads everywhere on your computer. That was big in the 2000s. I remember there's a program out there called the Bonsai Buddy, right? Which was spyware, right? It was just basically recording all your different actions, right? But really the first kind of major worm that was out there was this thing called the Morris worm. And it was by a person at MIT. He accidentally, it might have been But he he didn't really accidentally do it, but he released this Morris worm, and it basically just started going all over the internet, all the different networks, right? And it would just bog down everything. And he felt so bad about it that he reached out to some friends to have them work with him on it, on how to counteract it. But by the time he got there, this thing had already spread, and basically there was an article posted in the New York Times about it, and it basically really just kind of slowed down every single computer just through network congestion, right? It's a really bad thing, and that was kind of like a highlight of, oh, hey, this stuff can be dangerous. And that was back in 1988. So we're talking quite a few years ago. If we move forward then to 1999, I'm sure, I don't know, some of you older people in here might know, right? But if you remember the Melissa virus, right? Basically, interestingly enough, it was named after a man in Florida wrote it, and he named it after a stripper, an exotic dancer that might have scorned him. But basically, what ended up happening is this virus would come in through your email. If you launched it, it would copy your top 50 contacts, send itself back out, rewrite macros and lower security protections on your machine. And it was also kind of one of the first ever social engineering type of an attack, because what was happening is that there was some sort of subject line that was sexually suggestive, or it said, "I love you," right? So a lot of people were like, "Oh, hey, somebody loves me," and they click on it, and next thing you know, it's basically, doing exactly that, sending it out to your first 50 people contacts list and moving on and copying and copying. They did end up catching the gentleman. I forgot how many years. I think he got like X amount of months in prison, and he had to pay a pretty large fine. But that was also like another big one, again, 1999, where, computers back then were still relatively new, personal PCs, but everybody started getting into, Outlook, Thunderbird, all those different types of programs to read email. And back then it was not Windows XP wasn't even out yet. It was, Windows NT, and I think maybe Windows 2000 might have came out around that time frame as well, even though it's 1999, right? All right, so kind of moving forward, I'm going to pop up a poll question here, and hopefully some of you cybersecurity experts kind of know about it, but I'm going to fast forward, and here's the poll question. What worm is suspected / known to have caused Iranian centrifuges to blow up? See if hopefully you guys can go ahead and respond. Not everybody respond at once to this poll question. Hopefully you guys can see the poll question. I'm going to vote. All right, Nick, can we see the statistics on that poll question, buddy?
Yes, you can. So the first answer, Slammer, had 8%, Morris had 0%, Code Red had 19%, and Stuxnet had 73%.
Wow, awesome, guys. Yeah, so absolutely. It looks like the majority got it right. It was definitely Stuxnet, right? Stuxnet was that bad boy that, and it's one of those things, it's a case study, basically, that of how this worm, it was really quite a magnificent piece of software. If you think about it, it went ahead and it was probably on every computer in the world at some point, but you couldn't really tell. And it had a very specific mission in mind. And it basically, what it did was it went around, and 70% you answered this right. So hopefully I'm getting this right in my recollection. But basically it went around, and what it did, it could transfer through USB network connections, and it would go around and it would look for a very specific controller type on a very specific, that ran a centrifuge, right? And this particular controller type, if memory serves me correctly, was only manufactured in Germany, right? And and there was only like one known place to have this controller, and it was in the Iranian nuclear facility. So what this worm was designed to do, once it located that controller, it would start spinning up the speed of the centrifuges little by little all at the same time telling instruments to report normal, that, hey, everything's okay, everything's okay. And so as far as everybody knew, maybe there was a little bit of sound going on, but the centrifuge spun up, and they blew up, right? So this actually set back the Iranian nuclear program for many, many years. And on top of that, it's suspected, kind of known, that it was a joint United States-Israel worm that was built, right? And hopefully I remembered everything correctly. I was just going through memory off that. But yeah, and the other thing that I kind of did is when it was discovered and actually reverse engineered, it kind of made it like people were like, holy crap, we can do stuff like this, right? So it kind of like opened up the door to like a lot of bad actors utilizing, you know, tools like this. Same thing right now where we're at as far as the state of cybersecurity. There's a lot of different hacker groups out there, but there's also a lot of good guys building tools, right? That the bad guys are also using. So it's kind of like I guess maybe the term is a double-edged sword, but you know, again, honorable mention about Stuxnet, just because it really did kind of revolutionize everything. So kind of fast forward a little bit, the kind of now times, kind of the stuff we're dealing with, which really kind of gave light to, hey, the problems that we're having now. Hopefully I didn't fast forward too many times. Yep. The WannaCry ransomware. Okay. They called, I guess they called that because it made everybody want to cry that got hit with it, right? But it's the largest attack to date. It was all over news, like it was propagating like crazy. May 2017, and going back to that whole tool set, they were taking advantage of the Eternal Blue Pulsar vulnerability that the NSA had tool sets for. And I believe they traced this back to Korea, well, roughly Korea. It was like Chinese dialect keys and things like that. But the WannaCry ransomware was spreading throughout the internet on port 445. It hit over 230,000 computers in 150 different countries. If memory serves me correctly, I believe Russia was like one of the hardest hit countries. This was not the first ransomware, but it was also one of the most highly publicized. Again, it was on the news. And we had also, previously there was a ransomware that was kind of interesting called the AIDS ransomware, where it would just like kind of lock away and hide files. That was probably one of the most, the first ransomware. There was also CryptoLocker before this, but this was one that really kind of spread around as a, you could say it was a worm because it would attack port 445. It was actually stopped via built-in kill switch by this gentleman right here, Marcus Hutchins, who, interestingly enough, he was at DEF CON. It might have been in 2019. I can't remember. I had just left. And then there was a news story that came out that he was arrested by the FBI as he was leaving the DEF CON security conference in Las Vegas. And he got picked up by the FBI for his involvement with a banking Trojan called Kronos, right? He built it, but he didn't deploy it. So it was kind of one of those things where like, yeah, this guy's a hero. He stopped one of the biggest ransomware attacks of all time, but then at the same time, the FBI is coming and arresting him. I believe he got off, and there was because there's no real evidence that he did anything bad. So with all that kind of in mind, right, that kind of is the reason why we needed antivirus programs, right? So around 2000, we saw the emergence of the antivirus industry. Companies started to develop antivirus engines. One of the craziest ones I could always think of is McAfee, right? Everybody knows the story of John McAfee. If you don't, it's a pretty interesting one. He was not the first, but one of the bigger ones in the game. He sold his company, he went completely crazy, but that's a story for another time. But basically what antivirus is that there's a program and they have signature matches that say, hey, this is a known piece of malware. And here's its hash signature. And if you detect it, hey, delete it, block it, stop it, do whatever you got to do, right? And that's antivirus at its most basic. As time went on, you know, these antivirus programs tried to get a little more sophisticated. There's a bunch out there. I could think of ones, you know, AVG, Avast, that were kind of big in the, you know, 2004. Malwarebytes, obviously everybody's heard about that. And some of them started to kind of get more features, right? Like they said, oh, launch our safe web browser to make sure you're not hitting any malicious sites. Oh, we're going to take over the firewall control on your Windows computer, right? Some of them even do email phishing screen, hook into your email somehow. And they did do on some level predictions based on behaviors, kind of what EDR does, but not as advanced. So the primary detection is based on that signature that we have there. Okay. So again, it goes back to basically, hey, is this a known bad file type? And if it is, block it, right? So there are obviously some problems with that. Let's talk about those problems right now. Companies, right, basically, there's so many different viruses out there, and it kept growing and growing and growing to the point where there's so many different signatures, which is problematic in itself, because I'm sure some of you in IT have dealt with this, like say with Norton or other programs, that you have to download and maintain this database of file signatures. And I personally experienced in the past when I was an IT administrator, like you deal with these very large sample sets of gigabytes of data just from an antivirus program, right? And that could end up being problematic in itself. But so yeah, they have to keep on getting these signatures, right? And if there was no signature tied to this and the behavioral patterns didn't really match, an intrusion could go undetected, right? And then basically you could have a virus on your computer, your server, and not really know it. The other thing is too, I actually get mad. I think there was a class I taught. I don't know if Chris O'Shea was in this one, but I had tried to set up a scenario on a machine where I got a virus, right? I tried to get a virus and had them kind of hunt it down. And I was looking, and I got so angry because I thought of all the times people got viruses. I went to a virus. I tried to go get a virus on a machine. It was the hardest thing ever, believe it or not. And I went to all sorts of bad sites to try to get this virus. And we're talking, use your imagination what kind of bad site I could go to. But, it was basically, I was downloading things, running programs, visiting bad sites. And it took me forever to actually get a virus. So I would get mad that users would get viruses back when I think about it. I was like kind of enraged by it. But my point in saying all this is that you can't protect users from themselves, right? So even if you have an antivirus program and somebody's like, oh, hey, this executable I got from UPS, this is going to be like a good thing to execute, right? They're going to basically click on it, and they can make it still push through. Even sometimes the antivirus will pick it up. Sometimes that initial push is enough, right? And then on top of that, right, I kind of mentioned it. What if there is no signature, right? What if it's a 0-day type of scenario where there's no known defense against it, right? And that's what these apt groups are. And we're going to cover what apt groups are in the next slide, so we can kind of go over why we need EDR. But app groups can write programs. Like there's this one out there called Squirrel Waffle. I believe I had it in my last presentation, where it was basically a backloader for Cobalt Strike, which is a penetration testing tool. They also rewrite programs, really advanced malware and delivery mechanisms like Emotet and TrickBot, so that even if there's a signature tied to these programs, they're basically new, right? They end up rewriting, retooling, and they're new. And then finally, if you look into what an apt group does, they typically try to get in initial access and then make reverse shell connections. And antivirus, if you think about how it works in its most general sense, it's not going to detect a reverse connection to or out of a machine to a website. It's just normally not looking for that. And some of them do, but not all of them do. Okay. And it really depends on what you get and what you researched and things like that. So that's why, we kind of have to move away from antivirus. And before we get into an EDR program a little more, let's talk about what an apt is. So not a package manager. Any Linux geeks out there, when I talk about apt, anybody want to take a hint? Throw it in chat. I don't know, Nick's chat open?
Yes, the chat feature is open, Jesse.
All right, Linux nerds, tell me, what am I talking about when I'm talking about apt for Linux? Anybody want to throw a guess out there? Give me a little interaction here, people. Chris O'Shea, I'm looking at you, buddy. If you're still there, I don't even see your name on there, but no, nobody wants to pony up. Nobody knows what apt is. Sudo apt. So apt is short for us Linux geeks, the aptitude package manager, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about advanced persistent threat groups, right? Right around, I think 2014 is when this term was coined. We also saw it in the 2015, 2016 elections, like the DNC got hacked by Fuzzy Bear, I believe it was, which is a Russian app group. And we kind of see them all over the place now. If you guys went to ransomwatch.org, you could see all the different groups, and the groups are roughly tied to the type of ransomware that they end up deploying. Ransomwatch.org, I just posted that. And oh, that was directly to Nick. Whoops, Nick, go ahead and I'll do that. Here we go. Ransomwatch.org. Go ahead and check that site out if you haven't. There we go. Nick did it anyway. So these app groups, right? They are not just, hey, fly by night, let me see if I could get a virus on your computer, because that's kind of what we were before, like, oh, a virus that would inconvenience you, throw adware. I remember the biggest one, you would get a virus, right? And the solution was to download a program from the people that developed the virus to remove the virus, right? And it was just a nuisance. But nowadays they have these really skilled groups that have many different skill sets, and they have a plan in place, and they utilize things like a 0-day exploit. They'll look for credentials, and they'll move laterally throughout your environment to actually breach your systems. Their goals are to disrupt your business operations, right? And then they also hold your data hostage via exfiltration and encryption, right? So then they're hitting you double. And then on top of that, there's also been examples of them hitting you with denial of service attacks as well, to really kind of prompt you to do something or pay them or something of that nature. So with all that in mind, if you think about this type of what's going on, this type of an attack, typically antivirus program is going to really kind of look for a credential theft or lateral movement or things of that nature, or reverse shells being created. So that's kind of why we need EDR. So what is EDR? That's kind of what we're here to really kind of talk about, right? We talked about antivirus, we talked about what that's all about. Endpoint detection and response system. I also kind of was calling it for a while enhanced detection and response system, which I think is a little bit cooler of a term. I think I might have coined that term. I'm going to claim it right now. So if anybody ever tries to copyright it, you heard it here first. There's also extended detection and response. Some of them are called XDR systems. Basically, they're all the same thing. And a goal of an EDR system, it's a suite of tools, not just an antivirus signature engine that looks at, it takes a holistic approach where, you're looking at network host, files, and users. So all 4 components that make up a computer network. EDR systems can also tie into many different things, like it could become a centralized place for logging, different types of software control, vulnerability assessments, things of that nature. So that's what an EDR is really good at, and it's trying to compile a bunch of tools into one. Okay, let's move on from there. How does it do this, right? EDR gathers large amounts of data to detect an IOC. Does anybody know what an IOC is? Well, I'll just say it because nobody responded to me last time when I asked for a chat, which makes me kind of sad, crying a little bit on the inside. But it's called an indicator. Ah, there you go, Charlie. Good man. Oh yeah, there you go. Thanks, guys. Thanks for not making me sad. Appreciate it, Theo, Charlie. Good looking out. It is an indicator of compromise, right? So that's what these systems are doing, right? They start gathering data. Things like file hashes, integrity monitoring, outbound and inbound traffic, installation of programs, unusual login activity, creation of scheduled tasks. That could be an indicator of compromise. Things of that is what an EDR solution is looking at. An antivirus solution doesn't typically look for a task creation. Yeah, I could call it, so CNC callback, absolutely. That's kind of like what it would detect traffic to suspicious domains, things that, or known malware domains. Microsoft just took offline a couple of servers that were associated with known malware domains. And a lot of these EDR programs preload that stuff as it's detected in the wild. The problem with that is that a lot of times what ends up happening is one will get torn down, and then within a month or even a couple of weeks later, 10, 12 new ones go right back up. So it's really kind of a continuous battle. Moving on into EDR as well. EDR is also used to deceive attackers that have infiltrated the network. You basically would have to, it's basically, do I have it in here? Yeah, honeypots, right? Honey nets, everybody's kind of heard that term. They're really, in the beginning, right, a honeypot, honey net was more of like kind of a cool commodity, neat type of thing. I remember I set one up in class, I think called Honey Drive, where you could see people doing different attacks. There's a lot of great YouTube videos out there about a honeypot. And the idea is that it's a fake target that has no actual data, and it just wastes an attacker's time. Well, EDR solutions have taken that now and they've made it so that they have like fake account names, right? Fake computer names, right? That seem like they might be super vulnerable. And then the attackers waste their time going after that. So what's happening is that if they do infiltrate your network somehow and they start going after these points, the system's like, hey, somebody's clearly on the network, so they shouldn't be attacking these points, right? Because these are not real points. So we know that this is a bad action. Let us take action on it, right? And now, if you think about it, when we're talking about all the different software as a service features, right, that we have out there, we're on one right now. We're on Zoom, software as a service, right? How is that configured? Is that configured correctly? Do you have all the proper security controls in? Those are major parts of organizations now that you have to take into consideration, especially say if like somehow a Zoom configuration error makes it so that you open up a public meeting to everybody, right? And the next thing you know, you have somebody joining and you're discussing confidential data, or a password gets mentioned on that Zoom meeting, right? So a lot of different programs now, they are starting to offer SaaS connections, right? Where you have, this is, I'll go over what this is in a little bit here, but this is basically an integration point with an EDR solution that hooks into all these different services: Office 365, Azure AD, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, OneDrive, SharePoint, Salesforce, Google. So that's another extra level of security, and it's all being combined into one tool set so that you have a better overall view of your security posture. And finally, I should have mentioned this before, no EDR is complete without the ability to actually detect normal viruses, right? So keep that in mind as well. If it's still an antivirus program on top of that. So it's doing antivirus and all this other stuff to really kind of combat advanced persistent threats, okay? All right, kind of moving on from here. So again, the basic EDR rundown, right? Endpoint data is fed into an EDR platform. A lot of these are cloud-based. Can anybody think what might be a problem with a cloud-based solution after yesterday? Anybody know what happened yesterday? I'm sure some of you can. Yeah, Charlie, that's right. AWS outage, Greg, AWS outage, right? Yeah, the whole AWS East went down, which is kind of amazing to me. Like, it didn't go completely down, but it was down enough to where a lot of people experienced issues. I was teaching a class last night, or getting ready to teach a class, and the learning management system was completely down, right? So, and that was all in AWS. So I don't know, maybe they should really maybe have a proper failover. Maybe they should hire us to Compass to review their business continuity plan, right? Or their disaster recovery. But anyway, there's also on-prem solutions available, like a lot of the different products have. Yeah, let me see, there's another, yeah. Maybe somebody pushed something to get, but they have on-prem solutions as well, where you could deploy a server on-prem if that's still your preference. A lot of them have it. So what the EDR platform is doing, it's correlating and analyzing all this data that's coming in. Unusual suspicious activity is alerted on. Somehow, like there's a flag, there's a risk rating, there's a score, there's an alert, however you have it configured. On top of that, we have data being held for historical purposes and forensics research though too, right? Like, because you could be like, oh man, when did this get detected? Oh, wow, look at this. This is the first known occurrence of said piece of data. This has been in here. We got breached back when, right? And that could help you with your incident response reporting, right? HIPAA, things of that nature, where you have to or even Rhode Island's like breach notification law for all of us in Rhode Island. That's where I'm at. But other states have breach notification laws, so you have to be able to detect, and sometimes it'll save your butt if you can prove that you were doing all the right things. It's just, stuff happens. And on top of that, an EDR solution really should tie in all your endpoints, right? We're talking about Mac machines, Linux machines, Windows machines, anything that you have modern operating system on. Some of them even still support Windows XP for some people in Windows 7. I don't know why people are still running that. You really shouldn't be running that if you are, but some organizations still do, right? Another kind of key thing here is like any platform, especially when you have a platform that is this large and is collecting this much data, you have to have some type of human talent to operate it, right? You have to have somebody that understands, hey, what a domain call out looks like to a bad domain, like programs, general knowledge of basic programs on Windows and Mac and Linux. I'd honestly probably be a little bit behind on the Mac stuff. I'm more of a Windows Linux type of guy, but and also keep in mind, depending on the size of your organization, you may get a lot of data in that needs to be analyzed still. You may get a lot of false, believe it or not, even advanced machines like this have false positives because it does try to err on the side of caution. I think of a customer of ours that uses the solution we have, a legitimate program that they were using, a key installer program, right? For, I think it was like a CAD software or something, but basically it saw a key, right? So it assumed it was trying to steal keys. So it's erring on the side of caution, right? So, but it is a false positive. On top of that, a lot of them claim to have, the quote unquote AI or response capabilities built in. I mean, I don't know, some people on this call, and I'm sure some data scientists will disagree with me. I don't think there's any real AI, quote unquote machine learning. It's, I mean, things aren't sentient or anything, but a lot of them have things where you could built in actions to certain conditions, right? That will help you manage this platform. So keep that in mind. And it's not one of those things you should really just kind of ignore, because sometimes not everything is going to be a blaring alarm. It could be something as simple as, an end user logging into a machine that they never logged into. But if in that organization that said end user would never log into that machine, you have to be able to respond, and it's critical in preventing a much larger scale attack. So on top of that, that's where this managed detection response service comes in. A lot of these different platforms have what's called, they'll either try to tie it into the platform with some of those pre-built in tools, but a lot of these companies offer managed detection response services. So especially if you're a small or a medium organization that you don't have the staff on hand, you can hire these companies. It's almost it's like a SOC almost. I don't really like SOCs because I feel like what happens with SOCs is like they get an alert, they forward it to you, and then you get an email, and then you ignore that email, and they all go into that one little folder of an email, and then you basically end up getting hacked because you're not paying attention to those emails. But with a good MDR service, they're actually actively looking for these threats for you, and they're taking actions on them, right? Instead of just forwarding you an alert. And again, like I said, some of these platforms, they have the capability to detect certain actions or respond depending on playbooks defined. One of the tools we use, I'll cover that briefly, it has all this capability built in. You do need somebody to help you build it, or it also has some that's kind of pre-configured as well. So choosing the right platform is kind of what we're going to cover next here. Just like any purchase, careful consideration must be made. You need to really think about, hey, what does my organization need? Will the platform meet my needs? Does it have everything I have? Another big one too, right, is when you're talking about EDR solutions, right? What other tools does the EDR have, right? And then what do you have in your organization that it can replace, right? Because you don't want to have multiple items doing the same thing. Like some EDR solutions have the ability to detect patches or help you deploy patches or help you do a vulnerability scan for critical things, right? What kind of staff do you need to support it, right? You know, do you want to hire a kid fresh out of college? Yeah, maybe, but you should also have like a lead engineer that would be able to help you help guide that, you know, that young kid into excuse me, about, hey, what to look for, what not to look for. Should you support these managed detection response services, like some of the services out there, to, you know, help you navigate your initial setup, or help you just, you know, outsource it a little bit. Everybody always kind of references the Gartner. I love Gartner, don't get me wrong. Gartner Magic Quadrants, I use them all the time. They're awesome. But you also got to remember too, like, there's a lot of products out there that aren't Gartner, and that's because Gartner, I don't want to say, well, I wrote it right here. It's a pay to play service, right? Meaning that if you don't pay, you're not getting evaluated in that Gartner Magic Quadrant. You could have the greatest product ever, but you're not going to have any visibility from Gartner. So just kind of keep that in mind if Gartner's your go-to, right? So moving on here, I have, I found this great article, and it does a really kind of general overview of like some of the EDR products out there. And what I was kind of planning on doing with everybody right now is just kind of visiting this website. And I know through different incidents that I've dealt with, some of these places have had EDR in place or close to it, but not fully deployed. And I was just kind of talk to my experience with those. So let me kind of open this up, and then I'm going to do a demo of how an EDR prevents things versus, yeah, whatever. It's probably a bad link. I'm going to get hacked. And how some of the, how do these, in my opinion anyway, stack up against others. So I'll go ahead and post this in the chat as well. And it does a really great analysis, especially for those of you that don't have an EDR solution or you're interested in getting an EDR solution. I'd recommend that you take a look here and look at all these different ones that they have. I don't know what Wazoo is, but hey, it's if it's here, it's is that how you say it? Waza? Yeah. I do know Signet. I love Signet. They're relatively new. That's a platform that we use. Great feature set, great support, great partners to work with. I'll be demoing Signet for you guys in about 5 to 6 minutes here. Insight IDR from Rapid7. Rapid7 has great products. Metasploit framework, use it all the time. Awesome product. They also have the Insight VM for vulnerability scanning. I'm not too sure about their IDR solution. I have not really had any experience with it, so I can't really speak to it. But you know, I also know that Rapid7 products are pretty expensive from my experience with buying Metasploit Pro and Insight VM and Nexpose back in the day. ESET, yeah. Again, I'm not trying to bash anybody. I know ESET antivirus. I'm not too sure about the antivirus. CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike's the bomb, right? They are the #1. Anybody buy any stock in CrowdStrike? I did. I bought it at $70. Great investment, right? It's because it's going up and up and up, mainly because everybody's talking about EDR, right? So CrowdStrike's a great product. However, super pricey compared to all these other products I've talked about. SentinelOne, same thing. Super pricey, depending on, you know, if cost isn't your thing, hey, SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, go for it every day. F-Secure, don't have too much experience with that. Palo Alto Networks, I do have some experience with this. I worked with a client of ours. They had the Cortex system, and surprisingly enough, they ended up hitting, they got hit with ransomware. So they had this XDR system. It didn't prevent ransomware from getting on a bunch of their machines. So I don't want to say that maybe they didn't have it configured right, but that's my personal experience with them. Kaspersky, I would never go with Kaspersky for anything, only because at one point our State Department said don't use them. However, they are really good researchers. I think they're also the ones that kind of dissected Stuxnet, but I wouldn't go with that. Microsoft's Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection, awesome product. Get ready to pay somebody a buttload of money to configure it for you. It is not the easiest thing to go through. It takes a real expert. Trend Micro, a little bit of experience on that. Can't really talk to it too much, and I'll go over VMware. VMware and Bitdefender will be kind of the last ones I talk about because I don't want to belabor this subject too much. VMware, it's not VMware. It's actually a product called Carbon Black. I've seen Carbon Black in action. It's really awesome. However, you have to layer Carbon Black with other services. Like there's a product called Red Canary to get the full visibility of other products like Cynet. Cynet offers all those different products in one package. But so again, it could get pricey, and then you also have to have analysts to know how to configure it, etc. Bitdefender. Bitdefender is a little late to the game. They're starting to build up their EDR solution. Compass, we have Bitdefender for now, along with Cynet. Moving away from it, it's okay. My personal experience, and yeah, these are the last two anyway. Symantec, never really experienced it. BlackBerry, so BlackBerry it's not actual BlackBerry. It says it over here. Cylance. Cylance was a pretty cool product. It did get hit with its own cyber incident. I think 2 years ago, there was a major cyber incident with Cylance. So again, I haven't really ever worked with Cylance EDR, but kind of like breaking it all down. I'll talk about what Compass's preferred vendor is now, and kind of should use this program to highlight the difference between an EDR solution and a antivirus. I'm gonna just stop sharing my screen here for a moment once I can locate the stupid. I don't know how many of you deal with Zoom on a regular basis for presentations, but I do, and I hate it because it separates out everything that you're doing into all these little different controls, and then you can't find the button that you need, specifically the stop share button, unless you highlight in a certain area, and that's what I'm doing right now. So I'm stopping my share momentarily, everybody, while I log into the system. Feel free to pop some questions into the chat though right now, if you want me to cover anything specific. And I am just getting we use two-factor authentication here at Compass. Everybody should be using that as well, just to make sure that you're extra protected. And I'm gonna bounce over to, all right. So get ready to look at some type of Star Trek level stuff coming up here. Boom. And boom. All right, so this is an EDR solution, Cynet. As you can see, this is kind of cool. A little bit of fluff, gives us a cyber risk score. But as you can see, we're looking at those 4 different areas I was talking about earlier. We're looking at files, users, hosts, and different network connections. If we look at alerts, right? We have different alerts. I'm going to generate some alerts here shortly that just kind of highlight what's going on and different cool things that the products can do. Not all products can do what this particular product does. Other products might have a feature that this one doesn't, but overall, I like kind of what's going on here. If you look here, this is I forget what I did to get this generated, but this was using their tool to generate a malicious signature. But you could build in things like, hey, this is what's going on. This command was executed. Files containing sensitive information like passwords or financial information, right? So stuff like that is flagged. You could also go into this and you can say, well, no, this is a good process. We're going to whitelist it. You could do a little bit further analysis. You could send it to Cynet's MDR services for their evaluation. You could also set auto remediation policies depending on what you want to do, playbooks, anything that you might want to do when you detect an event like this. Okay, Forensically speaking, what I was talking about earlier, you guys might know, be like, hey, you guys get a lot of high level things. Keep in mind we're a penetration testing company, right? So we use a lot of different tools that would get flagged. It's actually really problematic for me because sometimes things don't work out all that great. But as you can see, it has a catalog of all the different files, like I was talking about earlier. Hosts, we have all different hosts. Users, we could take a look at all the different users on our systems, right? Like I'm a penetration tester. Kyle was downloading something weird. I know what he was doing. Felix is another penetration tester, things like that. So that's why we have a high risk score. Plus, not to mention, I run different programs all the time. And then finally, just to kind of highlight some other stuff, that SaaS integration we were talking about. This is relatively new for us, and I should probably address a lot of these, but there's different categories that I could go through. I could hook it into different services, right? And it will really tell me the different risks or problems I might have. And again, it gives us that overall big view, and it lets us comply to different standards, and it allows us to take actions to comply to those standards right away. So this is something, certainly, again, this is brand new. This was just set up last week. So hopefully it doesn't look bad that I don't have a lot of these configured, but that's okay. All right. So now I'm gonna pull up a Windows 10 VM that I have here that has basic antivirus, meaning just basic Windows Defender. And I'm going to launch some known bad programs here. The first bad program, and I don't have my full system set up, is Putty. Now, a lot of you are probably like, hey, wait a minute, Putty is not a bad program. Well, Putty is a bad program if you used a program to write a reverse connection and rewrite this basic 32-bit binary, which is what I did. So if you look at the description of this Putty program, it looks like just the one that was released. But this particular version of Putty, I had it re-encoded to connect back into our Cobalt Strike server for a reverse shell connection, right? So basic antivirus, watch it. Hopefully now all of a sudden it'll start picking it up, I guarantee you, but nope. So look at that. Oh, maybe it finally picked it up. But by that time, the damage is already done, okay? So basic Putty, getting launched, reverse shell connection, you wouldn't really know what's going on. I'm gonna take that same program and launch it. I have it in here. And I know for a fact SignNet's gonna block it, so that's why I have it zipped up here. Oh God, did I not 7-zip that? Oh yeah, sorry. Popping up on my other screen. Oh, somebody's got something in chat. I'll address that in a minute. One sec, I'm just putting in my zip password. And I'm gonna drag this over. Yeah, right away, SignNet detected it as a bad Putty because it has a known good signature for Putty. And it's like, hey, I don't like what we're seeing here. Gabe, yes, some EDR does cover mobile devices. It depends, right? Like, so a lot of your mobile devices, if you talk about cell phones, a lot of them can be covered with your cloud platforms, right? Where you have that tied in, MDM, things like that. So it would be monitoring email, things of that nature. But for the most part, if you have like an unrooted Android, which is really surprisingly hard to do in a basic iPhone, you probably don't need one. I mean, some people would disagree with me, but you'll notice that SignNet picked up on this alert right away. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked there, everybody. Finally, let's see if we can launch a couple more things here. It helps, right? Let's see if I could do a persistence mechanism, right? Meaning it's going to create a malicious task schedule. See if SignNet will allow that. Access is denied. Yeah, it won't even let me do it. And it should pop up an alert here in a minute, even though I just closed the alert. And let's bounce over back to our VM and do something similar with the typical antivirus. And we're going to rely on Windows Defender to kind of pick this up. Let's do persistence mechanism, task scheduler. Oh, look at that, made a scheduled task. Okay, so again, like an antivirus solution isn't going to pick up on this weird name being created, but a scheduled task creation could certainly be an indicator of compromise, especially when that's calling out to a shell or producing a message or something like that. Let me get out of that. Let's do another one here. What else would an attacker do? Let's try some memory access here. Hopefully, that's not going to work. Sorry, I don't have the sign-up process on here. Let's do enumeration. So it's going through, it's looking for files. Oh, there's our scheduled tasks. Let me go do that with over here with a SideNet EDR solution actually installed. Again, any EDR would pick up on these. Antivirus isn't. It's not specific to SideNet. SideNet just has this tool to help us highlight these things. Let's do, let's try enumeration on this guy. Oop, and there's my alert. Okay. Cool. There's our malicious task, things of that nature. So in a nutshell, like you could kind of see how, like I said, those app groups are going to create a scheduled task. They're going to create those reverse PowerShells. They're going to do stuff like that. You know, it's looking for these types of actions. As you see, a typical antivirus, if you're just relying on Windows Defender, which was on my VM, it's not going to pick up on stuff like that. It may pick up on other activities related to the event, but that task schedule didn't pick up on that, and it really should have, because like, what's a random scheduled task that's going to do something, right? Especially one with a weird name. I think that's kind of all I had for anybody. I'll leave it open to any questions if you wanted to. I could try to answer them as best I can, but I think that's about all I have for everybody. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that, and you kind of understand why you need to go from antivirus to EDR after this presentation. Again, our preferred vendor is SideNet. We're partners with them. They're really nice. Their cost is amazing. You can see the platform. It's really cool. It looks like you're on like the Starship Enterprise. So if you're interested in it, reach out to us. I'm sure we can talk to you about it, do a demo for you, whatever you want to do.
Perfect. I'd like to remind everybody that you can now pose any questions in the chat. I do see one here for you, Jesse, already. And I'd also just like to remind everyone, if you are seeking the CPE credit from ISACA New England, be sure to set your name in Zoom as your full first and last name. So Jesse, the first question I have for you here, do any EDRs cover mobile devices? Perhaps they don't need to.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, and I kind of answered that midstream, Nick, if you had been paying attention. Some of them do. Some of them have hook-in with SaaS services like that. You know, I personally, you know, some people disagree with me. I don't really think, the only real risk to an organization as far as a cell phone, I believe, is if they get in hold of your mail or maybe your Teams messenger or something like that. Lee's saying hello to Kevin. Hello, RCC. But yeah, I don't really think so. Other people might disagree with me. I'm open to discussion on it. But I don't really think it's a huge deal.
I have two more questions that were sent directly to me, so you probably didn't see them, and my apologies. These were sent a little while ago, so if you've already covered some of the information and you feel like you don't need to answer it, feel free to pass on them. The first one is, what are some common things you look for when choosing an EDR, MDR, XDR solution?
So again, like kind of all those things I talked about, you know, briefly, like, okay, how easy is it to deploy, right? Especially if you're a large organization with a remote workforce, right? How are you going to plan on deployment? Is it a cloud solution? Are you looking for a cloud solution? If everybody's remote, you might want a cloud solution so you don't have to set up special conditions back into your on-premise server. Is it easy to manage? What's the support level like? What's the support structure on it? How many does it cover? All my endpoints? So will it cover my Windows machines? Will it cover my Linux machines? Will it cover my Mac machines? If your mobile device security, like a phone, is a concern, does it offer an agent on that? You know, things like that. Most of them though are gonna, in price, obviously price is a huge deal. Like, you're talking CrowdStrike, for like depending on what kind of product suite you get, like that's one of the other things we work with. We like SideNet is because they offer a whole bunch of products in one, whereas the other ones, if they get MDR, they basically, you have to get the CrowdStrike Falcon. Again, awesome product, super expensive depending on what your budget is too. So that's kind of what I look for, or what everybody should look for when you're trying to find a good EDR solution for yourself.
Thank you. I have another question that was just posed here by Sally. What is progress of business in moving to EDR? Are large businesses on board, for example?
Yeah, so large businesses are definitely on board. Like a lot of different large businesses I've seen or dealt with, they're already ahead of the game, surprisingly, and it's more small, medium businesses that are holding on to your antivirus solutions that aren't really encompassing everything. But yeah, I mean, like if you have a good, well-configured EDR environment that is properly monitored, the chance of you getting hit with ransomware or hit by an advanced persistent threat group is greatly reduced.
Perfect. I have a question from Lee. This one's a question for me, actually, about the CPE credits. So everyone just provides their first and last name here in the Zoom chat. You just change your Zoom name to your first and last name. And what we do is we provide this list of attendees to ISACA New England after the webinar so that they can dish out the CPE credits accordingly. And if you ever run into an issue where you, for some reason, didn't see the CPE credits go on, we can always help you out. ISACA can always help you out. You can always self-submit the CPE credit as well. And we can always give a letter of attestation saying you were here as well. So we can work through that with you if you ever have any issues there. A couple more questions for you, Jesse. Is there value in also running DNS filtering along with an EDR?
I would say, yeah, why not? Any extra layer of security isn't a bad thing. So yeah, filtering out certain DNS. There used to be a thing called DNS black holing, right? Where you would like provide a whole black hole list of, known bad domains and where they would get redirected to. I guess it depends on how much administration you want to go through. The same could be said for like, hey, filtering outbound traffic on your firewall. It really depends on how much time and administration you want to put into something like that.
And I have one more question that you probably were not able to see. It was sent directly to me. The question was, I recall reading shortly after the SolarWinds attack that nearly all EDR solutions were unable to identify or stop the attack. Can you provide some insight on that?
So that kind of an attack, right? That was a little bit different, only because they leveraged a program that was installed basically with administrative rights that wouldn't really have any type of indicator that something was really compromised, right, until after the fact. There was a little bit of a study, and I believe one EDR, and I forget the name of it, did kind of pick up on it, but it was ignored because so whoever was looking at it didn't really understand what they were looking at, right? So it did get picked up by a few of them, but it was kind of overlooked because, again, the analyst did not understand what they were seeing. And then when they went back, they were like, oh yeah, geez, here's an indicator that this was a problem.